He had been taking food from the billionaire's kitchen for 3 years. Never enough to trigger an inventory count. Never from the plated meals or the weekly menu. Only what was headed for the trash at the end of the night. Containers sealed in foil, slipped into a black bag. Out the back door at 11 after the kitchen was wiped clean and the lights were off, Warren Ashford found out 2 weeks ago. A new security camera above the service entrance caught it all. Tonight, he did not call the police. He got in his car, Greenwich to Bridgeport. 45 minutes on a highway he had driven 1,000 times but never once taken that exit. He told himself he was going to catch a thief. He had no idea he was about to meet someone who would change how he understood everything he owned. The house had 3 kitchens. One for formal dinners that had not been hosted in 4 years. One for catered events that no longer happened. And one smaller kitchen near the back of the house where Darnell prepared Warren's meals every evening. Warren Ashford lived in a 9,000-square-foot home on a private road in Greenwich, Connecticut. He had purchased it 11 years ago with his wife Nadine. She had picked the wallpaper in the dining room. She had chosen the oak table that seated 12. She had insisted on fresh flowers every Monday because she believed a house without flowers was just a building. Nadine died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 7 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. The flowers stopped on a Tuesday. Warren never replaced them. He never changed the wallpaper either. He never moved the 12 chairs from around the table. He just stopped sitting at it. He ate in the smaller kitchen now at the counter, standing most nights. 1 plate, 1 glass, 1 set of silverware that Darnell washed and placed back in the same spot every evening. The house had 14 security cameras, a 6-car garage, a wine cellar stocked with over 800 bottles, most of them selected by Nadine before she got sick. Warren had not opened a single one since she died. He drank bourbon now, alone, in the study. With the door closed, his son Terrence lived in Los Angeles. He worked in venture capital and called once a month. The calls lasted 6 minutes, sometimes 7. They talked about the market. They talked about the weather in Connecticut. They did not talk about Nadine. They had not talked about Nadine since the funeral, and even then the conversation had been brief and practiced, like 2 men reading from scripts they had each written separately the night before. Warren ran a private equity firm that managed just under $2 billion. He went to the office 4 days a week. He came home at 6. Dinner was served at 7. He ate what was put in front of him. Sometimes all of it, sometimes 3 bites. It did not matter to him. Food had stopped mattering the same week the flowers did. He communicated with Darnell almost entirely through email. Weekly menus sent on Sunday evening. Approved or adjusted by Monday morning. That was the extent of it. In 3 years, Warren had never once asked Darnell where he was from, had never asked if he had family, had never asked how his commute was, or whether he needed anything. To Warren, Darnell was the chef, a function, a line on the household payroll. He was not cruel about it. He was simply absent. Grief had wrapped itself around him like insulation, thick and quiet, and over 4 years it had become indistinguishable from the walls of the house itself. He could not feel cold. He could not feel warmth. He could not feel much of anything, which meant he could not feel the people standing right in front of him. He drove the same black Mercedes every day, pulled out of the same garage bay, took the same route to Stamford, came back the same way. A man living inside a loop he had not chosen, but no longer knew how to leave. That was the life Warren Ashford had built around himself. Or rather, the life that had sealed itself shut the day Nadine stopped breathing in a hospital room 12 miles from the house she had filled with flowers. Darnell grew up 4 blocks from Grace Community Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. His mother Lorraine had worked in the cafeteria at Roosevelt Elementary School for 28 years. She was the woman who knew every child by name, not just the ones who could pay for lunch. The ones who could not pay, the ones who came in with their heads down and their hands in their pockets. Those were the ones she paid the most attention to. She would slide an extra roll onto their tray without saying a word. She would make sure the portions were full. And if a child came through the line looking like they had not eaten since yesterday, Lorraine would find a way to wrap something up and hand it to them on the way out, quietly, without making it a thing. She taught Darnell to cook when he was 9 years old, not because she wanted him to become a chef, because she believed food was the most honest language a person could speak. You could lie with words. You could not lie with a meal you made with your hands for someone who was hungry. She had a phrase she repeated so often it became the wallpaper of his childhood. Food is how you tell someone they matter. Darnell studied culinary arts at Housatonic Community College. He worked the line at 4 different restaurants in Fairfield County over the next 15 years. Italian, French, New American, a steakhouse in Stamford where he stayed the longest because the head chef let him experiment after hours. He was good, not famous, not decorated, but the kind of good that people noticed when they sat down and ate without realizing they had been holding tension in their shoulders until the first bite loosened it. At 38, a staffing agency placed him as a private chef for Warren Ashford. The salary was $85,000 a year. Benefits, paid holidays, 1 employer, 1 kitchen, 1 man to feed. Darnell kept his apartment in Bridgeport, 45 minutes each way on I-95. People asked him why he did not move closer. He never had a good answer for that. The truth was that Bridgeport was where his mother still lived, where his church was, where the air smelled like something he recognized. Greenwich did not smell like anything to him. The first thing Darnell noticed about the job was the waste. Warren ate alone. But the contract specified meals prepared for 4. Darnell had raised the question in his second week. A short email. Professional. He suggested adjusting portions to match the actual number of diners. Warren replied with 5 words. Just keep doing what you are doing. So Darnell did. Every night after Warren finished eating, Darnell cleaned the kitchen. He packed up what was left, and he threw it away. 15 to 20 pounds of food, every single night. Herb roasted chicken, braised short ribs, risotto with wild mushrooms, soup that had simmered for 3 hours, bread baked from scratch that afternoon. All of it went into the trash. In the United States, roughly 120 billion pounds of food are wasted every year. That number did not mean anything to Darnell. Numbers that large never do. What meant something to him was standing in front of a stainless steel trash can at 11 at night and scraping a perfectly made chicken soup into a bag that would sit on the curb by morning. He did that for 4 months without saying anything to anyone. Then, one night on the drive home, he passed Grace Community Church. The lights were on. The side door was open. He pulled over because he recognized the building from when he was a kid. His mother had volunteered there twice a year for the Thanksgiving meal drive. Inside, about 40 people sat in folding chairs, some on the floor. Reverend Thelma Hayes stood behind a plastic table handing out sandwiches, peanut butter on white bread, sliced apples from a bag, water in paper cups. Darnell stood in the doorway and watched. Thelma looked up. She was 67 years old, with reading glasses on a chain and hands that had been doing this work longer than most of the people in the room had been alive. She said, "We feed 40 people a night. We can keep them alive, but I wish we could give them a meal that made them feel like somebody." Darnell drove home that night and did not sleep. The next evening, after Warren finished dinner and went upstairs, Darnell cleaned the kitchen the way he always did. But this time, instead of scraping the leftover chicken and mashed potatoes into the trash, he packed them into 2 foil containers. He placed the containers in a black bag. He walked out the back door at 11. He drove to Grace Community Church and handed the bag to Thelma without a word. She opened it. She looked at the food. She looked at Darnell. She did not ask where it came from. That night, 40 people ate herb-roasted chicken with garlic mashed potatoes. A woman in a green coat closed her eyes after the first bite and did not open them again for a long time. A man near the back held the plate with both hands like it might be taken away. Darnell sat in his car in the parking lot afterward and remembered what his mother used to say, the sentence that had lived in him since he was 9 years old. He went back the next night. And the night after that, he never stopped. The system was simple because it had to be. Darnell only took what was going to be thrown away. Never raw ingredients. Never anything from Warren's plate that could be measured or missed. Only the surplus. The food that was already dead the moment Warren pushed his chair back from the counter. He packed it in foil containers, 2 at first, then 3, then 5. He placed them in a black trash bag so they looked like garbage on the way out. He left through the back door at exactly 11 every night. After the kitchen was clean, the counters wiped the trash, taken to the curb. Nobody saw him. Nobody asked. At Grace Community Church, the operation grew the way these things do. Word moved through the shelters and the underpasses and the places people slept when they had no place to sleep. 40 became 50. 50 became 70. By the end of the second year, Thelma was feeding 80 people a night. She never asked Darnell where the food came from. She never asked because she had been running that church kitchen for 22 years and had learned that help came in strange packages, and it was not her job to unwrap them. It was her job to serve what arrived and make sure it reached the right hands. Most community feeding programs in America run on almost nothing. Volunteers who show up when they can, donations that come in waves and disappear without warning. The meals they serve are built for survival, not dignity. Canned soup, white bread, instant oatmeal. Enough to keep a body running one more day. What Darnell brought was different. These were meals designed for a man worth $2 billion. Beef bourguignon, pan-seared salmon with dill cream sauce, roasted lamb with rosemary and thyme, soups that had taken 3 hours to build from stock made that morning. The same meal that sat on Warren's counter at 7 was sitting on a paper plate at Grace Community Church by midnight. The same food, the same hands that made it, a completely different world eating it. One night, Darnell brought a beef bourguignon that Warren had barely touched. 3 spoonfuls. Then he pushed the bowl away and went upstairs. 45 minutes later, it was in the trash bag. 2 hours later, a man named Curtis was eating it on a folding chair in the church basement. Curtis was 59, a veteran. He had lost his house after a string of medical bills wiped out everything he had saved over 30 years. He had been sleeping in shelters for 11 years. He looked at the plate and did not move for a few seconds. Then he took one bite. Then another. He said, "This is the best thing I have eaten in 11 years." Darnell heard him. He did not respond. He just kept serving. By the third year, the system ran like clockwork. 5 to 6 containers a night. 80 people fed. Thelma had started organizing the seating. She had found real plates somewhere mismatched but clean. She had insisted on that after Darnell told her once that people eat differently when they eat off a real plate. They sit up straighter. They slow down. They feel less like they are being kept alive and more like they are being invited to a table. Then, one evening in the third year, Darnell walked out the back door and saw something he had not seen before. A small red light above the door frame, blinking. A new camera. It had not been there yesterday. His chest tightened. His hands were holding 3 containers wrapped in foil inside a black bag. 80 people were waiting 7 miles away in a church basement. He stood there for 4 seconds. Then he walked to his car and drove to Bridgeport. Warren found it on a Tuesday. He had been reviewing the new security footage for an unrelated reason. A landscaping crew had reported a damaged fence near the east side of the property, and Warren wanted to confirm the timeline before approving the repair invoice. He was scrolling through the camera feeds on his laptop in the study when he saw it. Camera 14, the back entrance near the kitchen service door, timestamp 11:03, Darnell, walking out with a black bag. Warren almost skipped past it. It looked like trash, but something about the way Darnell carried it made him pause. The bag was held close to his chest, not at arm's length the way you carry garbage. Close, careful, like whatever was inside mattered. Warren rewound and watched it again. Then he pulled up the previous night. Same thing. 11:01, the night before that. 11:04. He went back 2 full weeks, every single night. Same time. Same door. Same bag. Warren sat in his chair and did not move for a long time. His first thought was not anger. It was calculation. He opened the household accounts on his second monitor and scrolled through the kitchen expenses. The grocery invoices were consistent. Nothing inflated. Nothing unusual. Whatever Darnell was taking was not showing up in the numbers. which meant it was not the ingredients. It was the leftovers. Warren closed the laptop. He picked up his phone and called Gregory Banks, his attorney. "Gregory, I need to ask you something. If an employee is removing food from my property without authorization, what are my options?" Gregory was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Legally, you have several. You could terminate with cause. You could pursue a civil claim for theft of property. You could involve the police if you wanted to make a point," Warren said. "I am thinking about all three." Gregory paused again. Then he said, "Warren, before you do anything, let me ask you a question. What kind of food are we talking about? Does it matter? It might. If this reaches the press, and the headline reads, 'Billionaire has chef arrested for taking leftover food,' that is not a legal problem. That is a reputational one." Warren did not care about headlines. He had not cared about public perception in years. But the word leftover stayed with him after he hung up. He sat in the study for another 20 minutes. The bourbon was on the desk, but he did not touch it. He was not angry. That was what surprised him. He had expected to be angry. He had the right to be angry. A man he paid $85,000 a year to cook his meals had been walking out of his house every night with food that belonged to him. But what he felt instead was something smaller and sharper than anger: curiosity. Where was Darnell taking it every single night for what looked like years? That was not casual. That was organized. That was a man with a destination. Warren thought about calling the agency, terminating the contract with a single email. It would be done in 15 minutes. Clean, professional, no confrontation. But he did not want it to be clean. He wanted to see. He put on his coat. He took the Mercedes keys from the hook by the garage. And at 10:45 that evening, he sat in the car with the headlights off and waited for Darnell to walk out the back door. Darnell walked out the back door at 11:02, same as every night. Black bag held close to his chest. He did not look up at the camera. He did not look around. He walked to his car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper, and placed the bag on the passenger seat the way you would place something fragile. Warren watched from the Mercedes, headlights off, engine running. Darnell pulled out of the service driveway and turned left onto the main road. Warren waited 9 seconds. Then he followed. They drove south on I-95, the same highway Warren took to Manhattan 3 times a week, the same lanes, the same exits blurring past in the dark. But tonight Warren was not going to New York. Tonight he was watching a pair of red taillights 4 cars ahead and staying close enough to see them, but far enough not to be noticed. The landscape changed slowly at first. Greenwich gave way to Stamford. The hedgerows disappeared. The stone walls ended. The houses got smaller and closer together. Strip malls with nail salons and check cashing places replaced the antique shops and wine bars. By Norwalk, the trees thinned out. By Fairfield, the billboards started. Warren had driven this highway hundreds of times, always passing through, always headed somewhere else. He had never once taken the Bridgeport exit. Tonight, he took it. The off-ramp dropped them into a part of Connecticut that did not appear in the brochures. A liquor store with bars on the windows. A laundromat still open at 11:30 at night. 3 men standing on a corner under a streetlight that flickered every few seconds like it could not decide whether to stay on. Darnell turned right, then left, then right again into a narrow street lined with row houses, half of them dark. He pulled over in front of a small building. Warren slowed and parked 2 blocks back. He turned off the engine and the headlights and sat in the dark. The building was a church, small, white paint peeling along the lower walls. A wooden cross above the front door that leaned slightly to the left. The kind of place you would drive past without noticing. The kind of place Warren had driven past his entire life without noticing. But the lights were on inside. And the front door was propped open with a folding chair. Darnell got out of the car. He opened the passenger door and lifted the black bag with both hands. He walked toward the church. His footsteps were the only sound on the street. The front door opened wider from the inside. A woman stood in the doorway. She was old. She wore an apron. She reached out and took one of the containers from the bag before Darnell was even through the door. Warren heard something from inside the building. It took him a moment to identify it. Laughter. Not loud, not the kind that carries, the kind that lives in a room where people are comfortable with each other, the kind you hear through walls when you are standing outside alone. Warren sat in the Mercedes for a long time. The leather seat, the climate control, the silence of a car that cost more than most of the houses on this street, a church. He had expected a pawn shop, a back alley, a middleman. He had expected to find the thing that confirmed what he already believed. Instead, he was looking at a church with peeling paint and an open door and the sound of people laughing inside. He sat there for 4 more minutes. Then he opened the car door and stepped out into Bridgeport for the first time in his life. The first thing Warren saw when he walked through the door was the food. His food. The herb-roasted chicken he had eaten 3 bites of 4 hours ago. The garlic mashed potatoes he had pushed to the side of his plate. The roasted vegetables he had not touched at all. It was laid out on a long folding table, covered with a white cloth. Not in the foil containers Darnell had carried it in. On plates. Real plates. Mismatched but clean. White ones and blue ones, and a few with small flowers along the rim that looked like they had come from someone's grandmother's cabinet. There were about 80 people in the room. They sat at folding tables arranged in 3 long rows. Some of them were eating. Some were waiting. A few were just sitting with their hands folded looking at nothing the way people do when they have been looking at nothing for a very long time and have gotten used to it. A woman near the front was eating the chicken slowly. She held the fork in her right hand, and her eyes were closed. Not because she was tired, because she was tasting it. The way you taste something when you have not had anything worth tasting in a long time. Next to her a boy, maybe 7 years old. He was eating the mashed potatoes with a spoon. His legs did not reach the floor. They swung back and forth under the chair. He was not thinking about where the food came from. He was just eating. The way children eat when they feel safe enough to stop thinking. Warren stood in the doorway and did not move. He saw Darnell, in the back, behind a small counter that served as the kitchen. He had taken off his jacket and put on an apron. He was reheating a tray of short ribs in a pan. He was plating them, carefully, one portion at a time. The same precision Warren had watched through a security camera. The same hands. But here in this room, they did not look like the hands of a thief. They looked like the hands of someone doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing. An older woman approached Warren. She walked slowly, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, an apron that had been washed so many times the color was gone. "Can I help you, sir?" Warren opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She studied him for a moment, not with suspicion, with patience. The kind of patience that comes from 22 years of standing in a room full of people who showed up with nothing and expecting nothing and still needing to be welcomed like they mattered. "You are welcome to sit down," she said. "There is plenty tonight." Warren did not sit down. He looked at the room. He looked at the plates. He looked at the chicken. His chicken. From his kitchen. From his grocery bill. Being eaten by 80 people he had never met in a church he did not know existed in a city he had never once stopped in. Then he looked at Darnell. Darnell had already seen him. He had seen him the moment he walked through the door. His hands had stopped moving. The ladle was still in his right hand. He stood very still behind the counter and looked at Warren the way a man looks at something he has been expecting for a long time and hoping would never come. He put the ladle down. He untied the apron. He folded it and placed it on the counter. He did not try to explain. He did not try to run. He just stood there and waited for whatever was about to happen. The room had not noticed. The people kept eating. The boy kept swinging his legs. The woman with closed eyes took another bite. Warren walked toward the counter. He stopped 3 feet from Darnell. "How long?" 3 years. Every night. Every night. The 2 men stood across from each other in a church basement in Bridgeport, Connecticut at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. One of them was worth $2 billion. The other made $85,000 a year. And for a long moment, neither of them said a word. Warren did not know what to say next. He had come here to catch a man stealing from him. He had not come here to stand in a room full of strangers eating his food off real plates while a 7-year-old boy swung his legs under a folding chair. He had not planned for this. He had not planned for any of this. Something moved in Warren's chest that he had not felt in a long time. It started small, not a thought, not a decision, a memory. He was 9 years old, East Baltimore. A second-floor apartment on Ashland Avenue with water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanked all night like someone was trapped inside it. His mother Hattie worked 2 jobs. Daytime, she was a kitchen assistant at the Belvedere Hotel downtown. Nights, she cleaned offices in a building on Pratt Street. She left at 6 in the morning and came home at 11. Warren made his own dinner most nights. A sandwich, cereal if there was milk, sometimes just bread with butter and a glass of water. His father left when Warren was 6. No note, no explanation, just a closet that was half empty one morning and a mother who sat at the kitchen table for a long time before she said anything. She never said much about it after that. She just worked. When Warren was 9, Hattie lost the hotel job. The kitchen was restructured. She was let go on a Friday. She picked up extra cleaning shifts, but it was not enough. For 3 weeks, the refrigerator had almost nothing in it. Every night, during those 3 weeks, Hattie made Warren a plate. Rice, beans if she had them, sometimes an egg. She sat across from him while he ate. "You not eating, Mama, I already ate, baby." At work. Go on. Warren believed her. He was 9. He did not know yet that his mother had not eaten at work, that she had not eaten at all, that she had divided whatever was left into one portion and called it his dinner and told herself that watching him eat was close enough to eating. He did not figure that out until he was 14, and when he did, he sat on the edge of his bed and cried for the first time since his father left. One night, during those 3 weeks, there was a knock on the door. It was late. After 9, Hattie opened it, and Mrs. Odette Robinson from the apartment next door was standing there holding a pot with both hands. "I made too much," she said. "Gumbo. You want it?" Hattie did not say anything for a few seconds. Then she took the pot. That night, Warren and his mother sat at the kitchen table and ate Mrs. Robinson's gumbo together. It was the first time in 3 weeks that his mother ate with him. She did not say, "I already ate." She did not pretend. She just ate. Slowly. Quietly. And Warren watched her and felt something shift inside him that he did not have a word for. He decided that night that he would never be hungry again. He would build something. He would work until the refrigerator was full and the rent was paid and nobody could take anything from him ever again. And he did. He built it. All of it. The firm. The house. The cars. The wine cellar. The 14 cameras. The life that Nadine had filled with flowers and that he had sealed shut after she died. But somewhere in the building of it, he had forgotten the gumbo. He had forgotten Mrs. Robinson's hands holding the pot. He had forgotten what it felt like to be the person on the other side of the door. Now he was standing in a church in Bridgeport, watching a man he paid to cook his dinner serve that same dinner to 80 people who had nothing. And the memory of Mrs. Robinson's gumbo hit him so hard he had to put his hand on the counter to steady himself. Darnell was Mrs. Robinson, and Warren had become the man who never knocked on anyone's door. He stood there for a long time, not moving, not speaking. Then he turned and walked to the back of the room where the old woman in the apron was stacking empty plates. He said, "What is your name?" She looked at him. "Thelma Hayes," she said. "Reverend Thelma Hayes. I run this church." Warren sat down on a folding chair across from her. It creaked under him. He was not used to furniture that creaked. "How long have you been doing this?" Thelma set the plates down. 22 years, she said. "This November it will be 23. Warren looked around the room. The ceiling had a brown stain near the far corner where the roof leaked. The kitchen behind the counter was small. One stove with 3 working burners, a refrigerator that hummed too loud, a sink with a faucet that dripped. The tables were old, but wiped clean. The floor was swept. She saw him looking. "We do what we can with what we have," she said. "Before Darnell started coming, we served peanut butter sandwiches and canned soup. That was it. That was what we could afford. Most nights, we ran out before everyone got through the line." She pointed to a man sitting near the wall. "That is Curtis. He served 2 tours overseas. Came back with injuries they could see, and ones they could not. Lost his house when the medical bills came in faster than the VA could process them. He has been sleeping in shelters for 11 years. She pointed to a woman at the next table with 2 children beside her. "Shayla," single mother. She had an apartment in Bridgeport for 6 years, paid her rent every month. Then the landlord sold the building. New owner wanted to renovate. Everyone out in 30 days. She has been in transitional housing for 8 months. The kids think it is temporary. She does not have the heart to tell them she does not know if it is. And the older man at the end of the row, that is Jerome, 71 years old, worked as a mechanic for 43 years. His Social Security check is $912 a month. A studio apartment in Bridgeport costs $1,100. The math does not work, so he comes here. Warren listened without interrupting. Thelma said, "Nobody in this room chose to be here, sir. Life just ran out of other places to put them." Warren said, "How did Darnell get involved?" Thelma looked over at Darnell, who was still standing behind the counter. Still quiet, still waiting. "He walked in one night about 3 years ago," she said. "He had 2 containers of food. He did not say where it came from. He just handed them to me and said this should not go to waste." She paused. "I never asked him where it came from, and he never told me. Because I learned a long time ago, when God sends help, you do not question the delivery method." Warren said nothing. Thelma said, "He asked me for one thing early on. He said, 'Can you find real plates? Not foam trays, not paper, real plates.' I asked him why. He said, 'They deserve a real plate.' That is the only thing he has ever asked me for in 3 years. Not money, not thanks, just plates." Warren looked at the table nearest to him. A white plate with a thin blue line around the rim. A fork and a knife placed neatly beside it. A paper napkin folded in half. He looked at the plate for a long time. They stood outside the church. The street was empty. The only light came from a window behind them where people were still eating. Darnell spoke first. "I know I should have asked." Warren did not respond. Darnell said, "I know that. I have known it every single night for 3 years. But I also know that if I had asked, you would have said no. Not because you are cruel, because you would not have thought about it long enough to say yes. You would have said no, the way people say no to things that are not on their schedule, automatically. And then the food would have kept going into the trash, and 80 people would have kept eating peanut butter sandwiches, and I would have kept watching it happen." Warren looked at him. "Why did you not just buy the food yourself?" Darnell almost laughed. He did not. But something moved across his face that was close to it. "I did," he said. "For the first 4 months, before I started taking the leftovers, I was buying groceries after work, chicken, rice, vegetables, cooking at home, and driving it to the church myself. $85,000 sounds like a lot of money until you are paying rent in Connecticut, sending $300 a month to your mother for her prescriptions, keeping gas in a car that gets 19 miles to the gallon, and trying to feed 80 people. The math broke in about 6 weeks. I could not sustain it." "But your kitchen throws away enough food every night to feed all of them. Every single one." Warren said, "How much food are we talking about?" Darnell said, 15 to 20 pounds a night, sometimes more, depending on what you did not eat, which was most of it." Warren was quiet. Darnell said, "In this country, 45 million people deal with food insecurity every year, and at the same time, 40% of all the food produced in America gets thrown away. That is not a guess. That is a number. The math does not make sense. I did not fix the math. I just tried to fix it in the one small place where I could," Warren said. "You still took something that was not yours to take." Darnell nodded. "You are right," he said. "I did. And I will accept whatever you decide. If you want to fire me, I understand. If you want to call the police, I will not fight it. But I am not going to stand here and tell you I am sorry for feeding people with food that was going into a trash bag, because I am not." Warren looked at him for a long time. Then he looked at the church. The paint peeling near the foundation, the cross leaning on the roof, the light in the window. He said, "I am not deciding anything tonight. I need to think." He turned and walked back to the Mercedes. He opened the door. He sat down. He did not start the engine for a while. Darnell stood on the sidewalk and watched the black car sitting in the dark 2 blocks away. Then he went inside the church and finished serving dinner. Warren drove home in silence. No radio, no phone call. Just the highway and the sound of the tires on the road. He pulled into the garage at 12:41. The house was dark. He did not turn on the lights. He walked through the hallway to the kitchen. The kitchen was clean. It was always clean when he came in after Darnell left. The counters wiped, the stove spotless. The trash bag replaced with a fresh one tied neatly at the top, sitting in the bin with nothing in it. Warren stared at the empty trash bag for a long time. He opened the refrigerator. Inside the shelves were lined with containers, each one labeled in Darnell's handwriting. Chicken thighs marinated for tomorrow. Vegetable stock dated that morning. A container of roasted garlic labeled with a small note that said, "For the risotto Wednesday." Warren realized he had never looked inside his own refrigerator. Not once in 3 years. He had never read the labels. He had never noticed the handwriting. He had never thought about the fact that a man drove 45 minutes each way every day to prepare food that Warren barely touched and then watched it go into the garbage without saying a word. He closed the refrigerator and sat down at the counter. The kitchen smelled faintly of rosemary. It always did after Darnell cooked. Warren had never noticed that either. He picked up his phone and opened the search bar. He typed Odette Robinson, Baltimore. He scrolled through the results. Nothing. He tried Odette Robinson, East Baltimore, Ashland Avenue. Nothing. He tried just the name by itself. A few results. None of them her. She could be dead. She probably was. She had been old when Warren was 9. That was almost 40 years ago. He had never gone back to thank her. He had never called. He had never sent a letter. He had built an entire life on the foundation of a promise he made the night she brought the gumbo, and he had never once told her it mattered. He sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. Then he picked up the phone again and called Terrence. It rang 5 times. Terrence answered with the voice of a man who had been asleep. "Dad, it is almost 1 in the morning. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Warren said. "I just need to ask you something. Do you remember Mrs. Robinson? From the old neighborhood." A pause. "Vaguely," Terrence said. "The woman next door. She fed us," Warren said. "When your grandmother lost her job, and we had nothing in the refrigerator for 3 weeks, Mrs. Robinson brought us gumbo. She said she made too much." Terrence was quiet. Warren said, "I forgot about her. I forgot about all of it. I built everything I have because of what I felt that night, and I forgot the woman who made me feel it." Terrence did not say anything for a while. Then he said, "Dad, are you okay?" Warren looked at the dark kitchen, the clean counters, the empty trash bag, the handwriting on the containers in the refrigerator. "I do not know," he said, "but I think I need to be." He hung up and sat there until the clock on the microwave read 2:15. The next morning, Darnell arrived at 8. He parked in the service driveway. He walked to the back door. He went inside and began prepping for dinner the same way he had for 3 years. Warren did not come downstairs. Darnell worked in silence. He diced onions. He broke down a chicken. He put stock on the stove. He moved through the kitchen the way he always moved through it, precisely, quietly. With the kind of focus that comes from doing something so many times, your hands no longer need instructions from your brain. At 7, Warren came down. He sat at the counter. Darnell placed the plate in front of him. Seared salmon with lemon and capers. Roasted asparagus. A small salad. Warren ate. He ate more than usual. He finished the salmon. He ate half the asparagus. He drank a glass of water. He did not say a word. Darnell cleaned the kitchen. He packed the leftovers into foil containers. He placed them in the black bag. He walked out the back door at 11:03. Warren watched from the study window. He did not follow. The second night was the same. Dinner at 7. Silence. Leftovers packed. Back door at 11. The third night was the same. At Grace Community Church, Darnell served the food the way he always did. But Thelma noticed something. His hands were not steady. He was measuring the portions too carefully, checking the door every few minutes. She walked over to him and said, "You have been looking at that door all week." Darnell did not answer. She said, "Whatever is happening, you have fed people in this room for 3 years. Nobody can take that back. Nobody can uneat those meals. Whatever comes next, that part is done, and it is real. Darnell nodded. He kept serving. Curtis came through the line. He looked at Darnell and said, "You okay, chef?" Darnell smiled. "I am good, brother." But when he reached for the ladle, his hand was shaking. He steadied it against the edge of the pot and kept going. On the morning of the fourth day, Warren was standing in the kitchen when Darnell arrived. That had never happened before. Warren was dressed, not in a suit, in a sweater and slacks. He was holding a cup of coffee. There was a second cup on the counter. "Sit down," Warren said. "We need to talk." Darnell sat. Warren remained standing. He put his coffee down and looked at Darnell for a moment before he spoke. "I have spent the last 3 days doing something I should have done a long time ago," he said. "I have been reading." Darnell did not respond. Warren said, "I called Gregory, my attorney. I told him what you have been doing." His first instinct was to draw up termination papers. "I told him to wait. I asked him to look into something for me instead." He paused. "Did you know there is a federal law called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, passed in 1996? It protects individuals and organizations that donate food in good faith from civil and criminal liability, as long as the food is donated without negligence and without intent to harm the donor is protected." Darnell shook his head. "No, I did not know that." "Neither did I," Warren said. "I had to have my attorney explain it to me twice. A law that has been on the books for 30 years, and I had never heard of it. Neither had Gregory, for that matter. He had to look it up." Warren picked up his coffee again. He took a sip. Then he set it down. "Here is what I have been thinking about for 3 days," he said. "You were wrong to take food from my kitchen without asking. That is a fact. I do not care what the reason was. You should have come to me." Darnell said, "I know. But I was worse," Warren said. "I was throwing it away without thinking. Every night. For 3 years. You saw the waste. I did not even see it. I did not see it because I was not looking. I was not looking at the food. I was not looking at the trash. I was not looking at you. I was not looking at anything." He stopped. "You saw something broken, and you tried to fix it," he said. "The way you went about it was wrong. But at least you went about it. I just sat upstairs and drank bourbon and let 15 pounds of good food go into a plastic bag every night like it was nothing." Darnell was quiet. Warren said, "I do not want to fire you, and I am not going to call the police. But I am also not going to pretend that what happened is fine and move on like nothing changed. Because something changed. At least for me." He reached behind him and picked up a folder from the counter. He placed it in front of Darnell. "I want to formalize what you have been doing," he said. "Not just in my kitchen. I have been making calls. There are 8 high-end restaurants in Fairfield County that throw away enough food every night to feed hundreds of people. Most of them do not donate because they think they will get sued. They will not. The law says they will not." Darnell opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, restaurant names, contact information, notes in Warren's handwriting. "I want to create a program," Warren said. "A food recovery operation. We collect surplus from restaurants that would otherwise discard it. We bring it to your church and to other shelters in the area. We do it properly. Licensed, insured, legal. I want to call it the Ashford Kitchen." Darnell stared at the folder. Warren said, "You would run it. You would be the culinary director. You would decide what gets served and how. I would handle the funding and the logistics. Thelma would handle the distribution." Darnell looked up. "Are you serious?" Warren said. "I have spent 20 years building things that make money. I want to build one thing that makes sense." Darnell did not say anything for a long time. He looked at the folder. He looked at the coffee cup Warren had placed on the counter for him. He looked at the man standing across from him, who had followed him to Bridgeport 4 nights ago, expecting to find a thief, and instead found something that he did not have a name for yet. Then Darnell picked up the coffee. He took a sip. And he nodded. They started the next week. Warren made 8 phone calls in 3 days, all to restaurants he had eaten at over the years, high-end places. The kind that served $12 sides of asparagus and $70 steaks and threw away whatever did not get ordered by the end of the night. The first call was to a French restaurant in Greenwich that Warren had taken clients to for years. The owner said yes before Warren finished the sentence. Good press, good cause, easy decision. The second call was to an Italian place in Stamford. The chef said he had been thinking about donating for years but never knew how. He was in. The third call was to a steakhouse in Westport. The manager listened. Then he said, "I appreciate what you are doing, Mr. Ashford, but we cannot risk the liability. If someone gets sick from our food, we are finished." Warren said, "There is a federal law that protects you. The Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, passed in '96. As long as the food is donated in good faith, you are shielded from civil and criminal liability." The manager said he would need to check with his lawyers. 2 days later, he called back. He was in. 30-day trial. By the end of the week, Warren had 6 restaurants signed on. 2 more agreed to a trial period. The rest said no, some politely, some not. Darnell spent those same days sketching layouts for the church kitchen on the backs of grocery receipts. He knew what was needed. A second prep station, a larger sink, storage shelves that could hold containers from 6 different restaurants arriving at different times each night. He drew it all out with a pencil on paper and handed it to a contractor Warren hired from Bridgeport. The renovation took 11 days. Warren paid for everything, but Darnell designed every inch of it. He knew how a kitchen needed to move. Warren did not. On the 8th day, Darnell brought something else to Warren. "I need 2 more people in the kitchen," he said. Warren nodded. "I can call the agency." Darnell shook his head. "Not the agency," he said. "I know who I want to hire." The first was Keisha Watts, 35. She had completed a culinary reentry program in New Haven 4 months ago. Before that, she had spent a year in a women's shelter. Before that, 2 years homeless. She could cook, she could prep fast, and she needed a job that would not ask questions about the gap in her resume. The second was DeAndre Collins, 28. He had a felony on his record. Possession. 3 years ago. He had been clean since. He had gone through a workforce development program in Bridgeport and spent 6 months volunteering at a soup kitchen because no restaurant would hire him. He loved cooking. He was fast with a knife and patient with a stock pot, and he showed up every single day. Warren hesitated. He said, "Darnell, I understand what you are trying to do, but hiring people with records with gaps that adds risk, insurance, background checks, liability." Darnell looked at him. "You want to fix the system. Start by trusting the people the system broke." Warren did not answer right away. He sat with it for a few seconds. Then he said, "Set up the interviews." Keisha started on a Monday. DeAndre started on a Wednesday. Neither of them had ever worked in a kitchen that served 150 people, but they learned. Because Darnell taught them the way his mother had taught him, not with lectures, with his hands. The problem started in the 2nd month. A health inspector showed up at Grace Community Church on a Tuesday morning. He walked through the kitchen. He checked the refrigeration units, the prep surfaces, the hand washing station, the storage. He wrote a report, 14 pages. The church kitchen did not meet the county food safety standards required for a licensed food distribution program. It needed a commercial ventilation hood, a 3-compartment sink, fire suppression, new flooring, separate storage for raw and prepared foods. Total estimated cost, $45,000. Thelma read the report and set it on the table. She did not say anything for a long time. That same week, one of the 6 restaurants pulled out. A customer had overheard a conversation between 2 servers about the leftover food program. The customer posted on social media. The post said, "I did not pay $90 for a steak to find out the leftovers go to a homeless shelter. Is this what fine dining has become?" The restaurant owner called Warren the next morning. "I am sorry," he said. "I believe in what you are doing, but I cannot afford the perception." Warren hung up and sat in his study for 20 minutes. Inside the kitchen, things were not simple either. DeAndre had run into an old friend outside the church one night after service. The friend asked him what he was doing. DeAndre told him. The friend laughed. He said, "You are working in a church kitchen for what? $14 an hour, come on man, I know something better. DeAndre did not go with him that night, but the next day he was quiet in the kitchen. He dropped a tray. He burned a batch of rice. He stood at the back door during a break and stared at the street for a long time, Darnell noticed. He did not say anything until the end of the shift. Then he walked over and stood next to DeAndre at the door. I am not your boss, Darnell said. I mean, technically I am, but that is not why I am talking to you right now. I am talking to you because I have been where you are. Not the same place, but close enough. And I am telling you, whatever your boy offered you last night, it is the same thing that already took 3 years of your life. You know that. DeAndre did not look at him. Darnell said, stay or go. That is your choice. But do not go back to something you already survived. That is not a choice. That is a refund. DeAndre came back the next night. He did not mention it again. Warren called Darnell that Friday. He said the health department estimate came in. The ventilation system alone is $22,000. We lost a restaurant. The costs are adding up faster than I expected. Is this going to work? Darnell said. It is already working. 80 people eat every night. That is not a plan. That is a fact. The question is not whether it works. The question is whether you are willing to pay for what it costs to make it last. Warren was quiet for a long time. Then he said, send me the full estimate. I will cover it. Keisha Watts did not talk much in the kitchen. She worked. She arrived at 4 every afternoon and started prepping without being told what to do. She read the menu Darnell posted on the wall each morning. She calculated portions in her head. She moved through the small kitchen like she had memorized its dimensions, which she had within the first 3 days. Before the shelter, before the 2 years on the street, before everything collapsed, Keisha had been a sous chef at a restaurant in New Haven. She was good at it. She ran the line during Friday dinner service. She trained new hires. She once plated 214 covers in a single night without a mistake. Then her husband broke her wrist. It was not the first time he had hit her, but it was the first time he had broken something. She filed a police report. She got a restraining order. And within 6 months, she had lost the apartment, the job, and every person she thought she could count on, because the system that was supposed to protect her moved slower than the man she was running from. In America, more than 80% of women experiencing homelessness have survived domestic violence. That is not a number Keisha knew. It was a number she lived. 2 years sleeping in cars and shelters in a church basement, not so different from the one she now cooked in. 1 year in transitional housing. 4 months in a culinary reentry program. And then Darnell. He had called her on a Tuesday. He said, I need somebody who can run a prep station and handle volume. The pay is not great. The hours are long. The kitchen is small. But the food goes to people who need it. Are you in? She said yes before he finished. On her 3rd week, she was prepping collard greens, 40 servings. Darnell had left her alone to do it. He did not hover. He did not check. He just said 40 servings by 6 and walked away. She stood at the counter with a knife in her hand and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not gratitude, not relief, something harder to name. She told Thelma about it later that night. She said, I spent 2 years being invisible. Nobody saw me. Nobody needed me. Then Darnell put a knife in my hand and told me he needed 40 servings of collard greens by 6. He did not ask me about my past. He did not offer me sympathy. He just said, I need you to do this. And I did it. And for the first time in, I do not even know how long I did not feel saved. I felt needed. That is better. Thelma looked at her and nodded. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Darnell never asked Keisha about her history. She never told him. But he watched the way she moved in the kitchen and recognized something in it. The same thing he had seen in his mother at Roosevelt Elementary. The way Lorraine used to hand a child a full tray without making it feel like charity. The way she made the cafeteria feel less like a line and more like a table. Keisha had that. She did not know she had it. But every person who sat down and ate a plate she had prepared knew it before she did. 6 months later, the numbers looked different. The Ashford kitchen served 150 people a night across 2 locations. Grace Community Church remained the main site. A second site opened at a community center in Norwalk, 12 miles north. 6 restaurants participated full-time. 2 more joined after the health department certification came through. Darnell hired 4 more people. All of them came from backgrounds that made traditional employment difficult. One had been incarcerated for 18 months. One was a single father who could not work during the day because of childcare. One was a veteran who had been out of the workforce for 7 years. One was a 19-year-old who had aged out of foster care and had never held a job. Darnell trained all of them the same way. Hands first. Talking later. Warren started coming to the church on Saturday nights. Not to oversee, not to inspect, to serve. The first time he stood behind the counter with a plate in his hands, he did not know where to put his fingers. He held it wrong. He tilted it. The mashed potatoes slid to one side. Thelma reached over and corrected his grip without saying a word. An older man came through the line. 71 years old. Thin. Hands that had spent decades working on engines. Old Jerome. He looked at Warren and said, first time Warren said, that obvious Jerome said, your hands are shaking like mine used to. Warren laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in that building. It might have been the first time he had laughed anywhere in a long time. He came back the next Saturday, and the one after that. Terrence started calling more often. The conversations were longer now, not by a lot, but enough. They talked about the program. They talked about the food. Once they talked about Nadine. Not for long, but they said her name out loud for the first time since the funeral, and neither of them hung up after. Terrence flew in on a Friday in October, first time back in Connecticut in 2 years. He stayed in the guest room on the 2nd floor. The room Nadine had decorated with blue curtains that still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets she used to put in the drawers. On Saturday night, Warren took him to the church. Terrence stood in the doorway for a moment. He watched the line. He watched Darnell and Keisha and DeAndre moving through the kitchen. He watched Thelma directing traffic at the serving counter with the calm authority of someone who had been doing this longer than most of the people in the room had been alive. He walked over to Curtis and sat down across from him. They talked for 10 minutes. Curtis told him about the VA backlog, about the 14 months it took to process his disability claim, about the apartment he had just moved into through a housing assistance program, the first place with his name on a lease in 11 years. Terrence listened the way his father used to listen in business meetings, carefully, without interrupting, taking everything in. Later, outside the church, Terrence said something Warren did not expect. 2 years ago, he said, I put together a pitch deck, 32 slides, a food waste logistics startup, an app that connects restaurants with surplus food to shelters and food banks in real time, matching supply to need, reducing the gap between what gets thrown away and what gets eaten. Warren looked at him. Terrence said, I never sent it to you. I had it ready. I almost emailed it 3 different times, but I knew what you would say. You would have said it was not a good investment. You would have said the margins were too thin. You would have said there was no money in feeding people who could not pay. Warren did not deny it, because it was true, Terrence said. But now you are standing in a church kitchen in Bridgeport on a Saturday night handing plates to strangers. So maybe the math has changed. Warren was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I do not understand apps. I do not understand algorithms. I do not understand anything your generation builds in a garage and sells for $1 billion. But I understand that you do. And I understand that you have been thinking about this longer than I have. Terrence looked at his father. Warren said, send me the deck. It was the first time in Terrence's adult life that his father had asked to see his work. Not evaluated it. Not critiqued it. Asked for it. Like it mattered. Like he mattered. Terrence nodded. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. They stood outside the church for another minute. Then they walked back inside, together. The anniversary dinner was held on a Saturday in November. 1 year to the day since Warren had walked through the front door of Grace Community Church for the first time. The building looked different now. The roof had been replaced. The peeling paint was gone, covered with a fresh coat of white that still smelled faintly of primer in the corners. The kitchen had been certified by the health department 4 months earlier. New equipment, proper ventilation, a walk-in cooler that Darnell had spent 2 weeks organizing until every shelf made sense to him. But the folding tables were still there. Thelma had refused to replace them. She said they had held the weight of 10,000 meals, and they were not done yet. That night, 162 people sat in those chairs. Darnell was in the kitchen. He had been there since 3 in the afternoon. The menu was simple: roasted chicken thighs with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, collard greens, cornbread, a meal his mother would have recognized. Keisha ran the second prep station. She moved through the orders without stopping, without checking, without asking. She knew. DeAndre was on the line beside her. He had been sober for 4 years now. He was enrolled in evening classes at the culinary program in Bridgeport. He still showed up at the church every night before class. He said it kept him honest. Curtis was not in the food line. He was behind the counter, serving. He had moved into a small apartment 3 blocks from the church through a housing assistance program 5 months ago. His first lease in 12 years. But he still came every night, not to eat, to work. He set the tables. He cleared the plates. He made sure the napkins were folded. Old Jerome sat at his usual spot near the wall. He ate slowly. He always ate slowly. He nodded at Warren when he walked past. Thelma stood at the door and greeted every person who came in, the way she had for 23 years. At 7:30, Warren stood up. He did not move to the front of the room. He just stood where he was near the counter, and the room got quiet on its own. He spoke for less than a minute. "A year ago," he said, "I followed my chef to this church because I thought he was stealing from me. Turns out he was taking food from my kitchen and giving it to people who needed it more than my garbage can did. I was wrong about him. I was wrong about a lot of things. This kitchen exists because Darnell was brave enough to do what I should have been doing all along. I do not have a speech prepared. I just wanted to say that, and to say thank you to all of you for letting me be here." He sat down. Darnell did not come out of the kitchen. He did not wave. He did not bow. He looked through the serving window, caught Warren's eye, and nodded once. Then he turned back to the stove and kept plating. At the first table near the window, a woman sat with a plate in front of her. She was 74 years old. Her name was Lorraine. She had driven up from Bridgeport that evening. She did not come to the church often. Her knees made the stairs difficult. But tonight she had come. She ate the chicken slowly. She tasted the herbs. She tried the mashed potatoes. She tore a piece of cornbread and held it in her hand for a moment before she ate it. She did not say much. She did not need to. She had spent 28 years feeding other people's children in a school cafeteria and teaching her own son that food was how you told someone they mattered. She looked toward the kitchen where Darnell was working. She watched him plate a dish and hand it through the window. She watched his hands, the same hands she had taught to hold a wooden spoon when he was 9 years old. She smiled. "That is my boy," she said. To no one in particular, to everyone. Darnell still cooked for Warren 5 nights a week. He still drove 45 minutes each way on I-95. He still labeled every container in the refrigerator by hand. But his title had changed. He was the culinary director of the Ashford Kitchen. He oversaw both sites' trained new hires and managed the restaurant partnerships that now numbered 9. On Saturday mornings, he taught a free cooking class at Grace Community Church, basic skills. How to make rice that did not stick. How to roast a chicken with salt and oil and nothing else. How to stretch a bag of groceries into 5 meals instead of 2. The classes were open to anyone living in a shelter or transitional housing. He told Thelma once, "I am not trying to make them chefs. I am trying to teach them that cooking for yourself is a kind of freedom. When you can feed yourself, you do not have to wait for someone else to decide you are worth feeding." Warren sold 2 of the 6 cars in the garage. A Porsche he had not driven in 3 years, and a Range Rover that Nadine had picked out but never drove after her diagnosis. He used the money to establish the Ashford Foundation, a small fund that provided grants to food rescue programs in 3 cities: Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport. The dining table in the Greenwich house still seated 12. Once a month, It was full. Warren hosted a dinner for the entire Ashford kitchen team. Darnell cooked. Keisha, DeAndre, Thelma, Curtis, Jerome, and the rest of the staff sat around the table that had been empty for 4 years and ate together. Warren sat at the head, not because he owned the table, because Thelma told him to. Keisha managed the kitchen at the Norwalk site. She ran it the way Darnell had taught her, quietly, precisely, without shortcuts. In the evenings after service, she worked on a small cookbook. Every recipe used ingredients that could be bought at a corner store or a dollar market. She called it Cooking on What You Got. She did not have a publisher. She did not need one yet. She just kept writing. DeAndre graduated from the culinary program in May. He was hired as a line cook at a mid-range restaurant in Stamford. The restaurant donated its surplus food to the Ashford kitchen every night. DeAndre made sure of it. He told the head chef on his first day, "If the food is going in the trash, it is going to me instead." The chef said fine. Curtis still walked to Grace Community Church every evening, 3 blocks from his apartment. He arrived at 5:30. He set up the tables. He folded the napkins. He placed a fork and knife beside every plate. After service, he stayed to clean. He stacked the chairs. He mopped the floor. He locked the side door on his way out. Someone asked him once why he did not take a night off. He said, "This is the only family I got." You do not take nights off from family. Every night in America, millions of pounds of food are thrown away. In restaurant kitchens, in hotel banquet halls, in private homes where meals are cooked for 4 and eaten by 1. The food goes into bags. The bags go into dumpsters. The dumpsters go to landfills. And the cycle repeats the next morning without anyone stopping to notice what was lost. At the same time, millions of people go to sleep hungry, not in some distant country, here, in cities with Michelin-starred restaurants and wine bars, and $12 cups of coffee, people sleeping in shelters and in cars and on church pews and in places that were never meant to be slept in. The distance between those two facts is not a shortage. There is no shortage. There is enough food in this country to feed every person in it. The distance is something else. It is the space between the kitchen and the curb, between the person who throws it away and the person who would have eaten it, between the man who owns the table and the man who has not sat at one in 11 years. Darnell took food from a billionaire's kitchen for 3 years. He never sold it. He never kept it. He gave it to people who had been forgotten by the same world that made his boss rich. And when the billionaire found out, he did not call the police. He pulled up a chair. That is not a fairy tale. That is a choice. The kind of choice that is available to anyone who has ever looked at a plate of food headed for the trash and wondered if someone out there might need it. The answer is always yes. Someone always needs it. Sometimes the most expensive meal in the world is the one nobody bothered to save from the trash. Before I go, I want to step outside the story for a moment and talk to you directly. This story is fictional. The characters, the names, the places, the events, all of it was created for the purpose of telling a story. Warren Ashford is not a real person. Darnell is not a real person. Grace Community Church does not exist at the address I described. But the issues in this story are real. Food waste in America is real. 120 billion pounds of food discarded every year. That number comes from the United States Department of Agriculture. It is not an estimate I made up for dramatic effect. It is a measured, documented, staggering amount of waste in a country where 45 million people experience food insecurity. The Good Samaritan Food Donation Act is real. It was signed into law in 1996. It protects food donors from liability when they donate in good faith. Most people do not know it exists. Most restaurant owners do not know it exists. I did not know it existed until I started researching this story. Homelessness is real. The veterans who cannot navigate the VA system, the single mothers who lose housing when a landlord sells a building, the elderly who worked for decades and still cannot afford rent on Social Security. The people in this story are fictional, but their situations are taken from patterns that repeat every single day in every city in this country. Domestic violence as a pathway to homelessness is real. More than 80% of women experiencing homelessness have survived it. That statistic has not changed in years. I wrote this story Because I once watched a restaurant throw away enough food to feed my entire block growing up. 2 full trash bags at the end of the night, set on the curb like they meant nothing. That image stayed with me. I am not a billionaire. I am not a chef. I have never run a food program. But I believe that how we treat food says a lot about how we treat people. And right now, we are treating both like they are disposable. If this story made you think even for a second about the food you throw away, that is enough. You do not have to start a foundation. You do not have to call 8 restaurants. You just have to start noticing. If you want to do more, organizations like Feeding America and your local food bank are always looking for volunteers and donations. Look into food rescue programs in your area. Learn about the Good Samaritan Act. If you own a restaurant or work in food service, find out how to donate safely and legally. The framework already exists. It has existed for 30 years. Most people just do not know about it. Me. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story stayed with you, maybe pass it on to someone who needs to hear it. That is all I have.